one, but if you got a Bible, let's open up to Judges chapter 16. So I point it that way. Sweet. And if you like lesson titles, this is the lesson title for us today, From Strong to Weak and Weak to Strong. And we're going to be talking about a character that a lot of people who have gone to church their whole life knows about, a guy called Samson. And Samson, if you've read this story before, you might have mixed feelings about this character. He's actually a Christ-like figure, which means he embodies some Christ-like things. And there's deep parallels between Samson and Jesus. But if you have read the story before, you might also struggle with that idea that Samson's a Christ-like guy or a Christ-like figure. Let's talk about some similarities, and then we'll talk about some differences so that you make sure that we all are on the same page. Samson and Jesus are both prophesied about by angels to their parents. An angel appears to both their mothers and says, hey, you're going to have a great son who's going to do great things, and he's going to save my people. And that's pretty cool. They're both set apart as Nazarites. Jesus of Nazareth was a Nazarite, and if you've seen a photo of Jesus before, it's pretty accurate. He's usually a skinny fella with long hair. Why does he have the long hair? He's taken the Nazarite vow. That's tradition. I don't know that that's true, but it's tradition. They're both empowered and filled with the Spirit early on. Both Jesus and Samson are betrayed by their own people. So actually, Samson gets handed over to the Philistines by not other enemies, but his own kinsmen. And in the same way, Jesus is betrayed by Jewish people, handed over to be killed by his own people. They both defeat their enemies through their death. So, spoiler alert, Samson's going to die in this story. Jesus also died, and he died to free us from sin. There's victory in death. And they both act as deliverers for God's people. Now, huge contrast. Samson is very angry. He's full of pride. He acts in revenge, where Jesus often acts in humility and obedience and love, and their motivations are very different. You know, Samson gives up his life for vengeance sake, where Jesus gives up his life for saving sake because of his love. Samson was very morally compromised, whilst Jesus lived a sinless and blameless life. And Samson was blinded at the end of his life, where Jesus constantly gave the blind vision. Yeah. Samson dies in judgment, and Jesus dies in mercy. So that although he is a Christ-like figure, there's some big contrasts, but there's some awesome similarities as well. Yeah. And in the Newcastle Church, we've been studying out the book of Judges, and it's been an awesome study so far, and I think we've gotten a lot from this study. And one of the themes in this passage is an ironic theme about vision and how we see things and how God sees things. And if you change my slide, I'm going to accept this doesn't work. In Judges 21, verse 24, this is the last line of the book of Judges, but it's actually a through line throughout the whole book, is in those days Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. And again, what gets repeated is a similar line, which is the Israelites did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. So there's two contrasts here. Doing what's right in our own eyes, and sometimes when we do what we think is right and what looks right to us, it actually looks wicked and evil to God. And that's the stark contrast right here. And the parallel and the truths that we get out of the book of Judges should help the kingdom and the church in our modern day. That actually Jesus is supposed to be our king. There is a king in God's kingdom. It shouldn't be said there is no king in the Gold Coast Church of Christ. Jesus is king. And sometimes we're tempted to do what we think is right, but But that's where we humble out and we challenge and we wrestle. Well, how does God see this? What does God think is right? Because just because I might feel like it's right doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And in the church right now, it needs to be a moment where we fight to really see God the way we're supposed to see him. And what's going to happen in Samson's life is he has his eyes for most of this story, and he loses them at the end so that he can actually see God clearly for the first time in his life. And it's a tragic story and it's a sad story, but I think it's a very powerful story about how God was very gracious to a man, and he gave him so much grace and so much opportunities until he takes his eyes and Samson starts seeing the world the way he's supposed to see it. So we're going to read this story, and then I'm going to have 3 points from the text. I'm going to take my jumper off because it's getting warm. I'm going to start sweating. Don't look, guys. All right. Hopefully you're in Judges chapter 16. And we're actually going to start in Judges 15, a few verses before we get to 16. So Judges 15 verse 16, this is right after Samson just kills a bunch of guys and then has a joke about, I killed you guys with a donkey bone and I made you guys a donkey. It's a pretty good burn right there. Let's start in verse 16, just so you read it. You'll appreciate Samson's humor. Then Samson said, with a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. And with a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. When he finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone and the place that was called Ramath Lehi. But because he was thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, you have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? Then God opened up a hollow place in Lehi, and the water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned, and he was revived. So the spring was called En-Hegor, and it is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for about 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Let's stop there for a second. Can I get the next slide up? Should be a map. And click it one more time. It should zoom in. Awesome. In case you're not familiar with Middle Eastern geography, here's a map for us. But, that's way too zoomed in. Gosh. All right, let's go back there. You got some great projectors here. So Samson's down here in this green area of Judah, and there's a place called Gath, which comes up in our story. That's where he's going to go. And that's actually heavily Philistine area. Samson should not be there. This is a bad place to be. I don't know what the equivalent would be for Queenslanders, but maybe it would be like walking through the streets of Sydney, you know? Like, we don't go there. We don't go to that place. It's the opposite from me, just so you know. It's like Brisbane CBD on a Wednesday. But he's going to go to Gaza, and he just had this great spiritual moment with God. God gives him water to drink, and then we'll see what he does in verse 1 of chapter 16. Let's keep reading. One day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute, and he went in to spend the night with her. And the people of Gaza were told, Samson is here. So they surrounded the place that laid in wait of him all night at the city gate. They made no move during the night, saying, at dawn we'll kill him. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. Then he got up and took hold of the doors of the city gate, together with the 2 posts, and tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders, and he carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Let's stop there for a second. If you can find Hebron on the map, it's all the way in the middle of this green area. So from Gath to Hebron, he carries these giant doors. They're like hundreds of kilos heavy. And this is about 400 or 500 kilometers. So it's like, not 100, 40 to 50 kilometers. It's a long distance. And you ask, what's the spiritual point from that, Ben? Like, why would he do such a thing? There is none. He's just flexing his strength right there. He's making sure people know I'm a strong dude and I can carry heavy things far ways. Boys would never do that today. No. Let's keep reading. Verse 4. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of your great strength and how we can overpower him so that we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." That is a life-changing amount of silver, guys. It's like the lotto. Verse 6. So Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson answered her, "If anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man." Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, and she tied him with them. When the men hidden in the room, she called to them, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the bowstrings and easily, as pieces of string snaps when it comes close to a flame. So the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, "You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied." And he said, "If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man." So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. And then with the men hidden in the room, she called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. Delilah then said to Samson, "All this time you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied." And he said, "If you were to weave 7 braids of my head into fabric on the loom and tighten it to a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man." So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of hair, wove them into the fabric, and tightened it with a pin. She again called him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom with the fabric. Then she said to him, "How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me, and you haven't told me the secret of your great strength." With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. So he told her everything. "No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I've been a Nazirite dedicated to the Lord from my mother's womb. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man." When Delilah saw that he had told her everything, she sent word to the rulers of the Philistines, "Come back once more. He has told me everything." So the rulers of the Philistines returned with the silver in their hands, and after putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and she began to subdue him, and his strength left him. Then she called, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And he woke from his sleep and thought, "I'll just go out as before and shake myself free." But he did not know that the Lord had left him. When the Philistines seized him, they gouged out his eyes and took him down to Gaza, binding him and with bronze shackles. They set him to grind grain in the prison, but the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson our enemy into our hands." And when the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, "Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain." While they were in high spirits, they shouted, "Bring out Samson to entertain us." So they called Samson out of prison, and he performed for them. And they stood him among the pillars. And when Samson said to the servant who held his hand, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them," Now the temple was crowded with people and women, with men and women, and all the rulers of the Philistines were there, and on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. Then Samson prayed to the Lord, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more and let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." Then Samson reached toward the central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on one and his left on the other. And Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than when he lived. Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him, and they brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtal in the tomb of Moab, his father, and he led Israel for 20 years. Amen. It's a great passage. It's a long passage, and it's an epic way to go, some might say. Let me die with the Philistines, and let me get revenge for my eyes, is his last departing words. But we can get some great spiritual points from this, and I'm going to have 3 points from the text today. The first point is this: the source of our strength. You know, one of the big themes of Samson's life is strength. And if you don't know this, God gifts him with superhuman strength. He's the original Superman, the guy that Superman was based off. I'm joking, that's not true. Maybe it is. But Samson has this supernatural strength, this supernatural ability to be strong physically, but not really emotionally. Okay? He's strong in his muscles, but not necessarily strong in his heart when it really matters. And what we're going to talk about today is, where do we really get our strength from? Where do we draw our strength from as Christians and as disciples? You know, there's moments in our life where we can draw strength from people around us. If you get nervous to speak up front, sometimes it's helpful to just look for your wife and she'll give you a bit of strength, a bit of confidence, you know? You know, when it comes to the weddings, and Darcy and Aisha getting married, you know, there's this moment where you're sitting down, you're waiting for the bride to come in, this music's playing, Darcy's like almost in tears waiting for her. He's such an emotional guy. Everyone stands, the doors get swung open, you see the bride for the first time, she's smiling, she's looking at her groom, and I'm a bit of a sucker for weddings. And at that moment, there was, you know, a little something came here. And where did I get my strength? Well, I looked up to the roof and thought, whoa, how'd they get that fan up there? You know, sometimes you just got to get your strength from things, you know? If you look too much at what's really going on. But as Christians, we got to talk about, where do I get my strength from? And what does it really look like to be strong as a Christian? Because I'm sure you've experienced someone who is a Christian, and you look at their life and you look at the way they handle things, and you think, that dude or that sister's strong. Like, they go through some things and it's impressive, it's inspiring. And in this passage right here, Samson's strong in his muscles, but not necessarily strong in his character. But what happens in verse 18 of chapters 15 is he has this incredible moment with God. And he has this victory where he kills people, and whether it's just or not, I'm not here to speak about that moment. But afterwards, he's exhausted from this battle. And he says in verse 18 of chapters 15, because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Then God opened up a hollow place in Lehi, and when water came out of it, when Samson drank, his strength returned and he was revived. You know, God so often wants to revive us and strengthen us, and he wants to be the source of strength for us. And there's this great moment where he cries out, and for the first time in Samson's life, he can't naturally get by on his own physical strength. He actually needs divine intervention. He needs God to come through for him at this moment. He cries out, God comes through, and you're like, wow, this guy's getting it. Things are going to turn around in his life. Things are going to start going great. And then sadly, after he gets revived, the very next verse is not that one. It's verse 1 of chapter 16, where it then just says he saw a prostitute and he went to spend the night with her. So he's gone from crying out to God, getting his strength from God, to then going to get his strength from companionship. Let me go hang out with a prostitute. And I don't think they were playing Monopoly Go that night, all right? He's getting his strength in all the worst ways. And it's this sad moment where he's got this spiritual high and a very spiritual low straight afterwards. And the question comes for us and for our lives is, where am I inclined to try to draw my strength from? Because life is hard. Things are challenging. Things don't always go the way we want it to. And at those moments, we have opportunities where we can, like Samson, cry out to God and say, God, I need help right now. I need divine intervention. I can't do this by myself anymore. I will die if you don't come through for me. But if things aren't that bad, we can very often cry out to companionship or other things in our life to give us this strength. And again, there's this challenge that's brought before us is, where does strength really come from? You know, in Samson's life, he's pretty, if you know the story in chapters 13, his strength in his mind comes from his hair. But really it comes from his relationship and his covenant that he made with God. And the sign of that covenant was, I won't cut my hair. So God says to his mum, when he's prophesied to be born, your son is going to deliver Israel. He's going to do great things. I've got this plan for him. He's going to crank, he's going to lead, and he's going to be super strong. Just don't let him drink wine. Don't let him intermarry with the wrong kinds of people, and don't cut his hair. And Samson does all those things. And what's interesting, even till up to chapter 16, he's actually done a lot of those things already, except for cutting his hair. That was the last part to his covenant that he still had kept. So in his mind, the source of his strength was his hair. But in God's mind, the source of his strength was his covenant and his relationship with God. That, hey, God is his strength. Your hair's just a sign of what I've already given you. And again, Samson gets confused about where his strength truly comes from. And I want to put before you, the strength that we get in the church is awesome. The church is supposed to give us some sort of strength to some extent. And when people come to church, I remember my first time coming to church and hearing the singing and getting the side hugs and people high-fiving me and talking to me, and I thought, wow, this is incredible. This is a cool place to be. But the strength of the church is not just in the singing. It's not just in the preaching. It's not just in our friendships. The strength of the church is supposed to be, we love God with everything that we got. We made a covenant with God, and we're going to keep it true to the end. The strength of the church is our deep love for God. And it seems that Samson, somewhere along the way, forgot that that was the real source of his strength. That God always came through for him. He was faithless sometimes, and God was still faithful until he gets to the very end and he breaks all the oaths that he made, and God departs for him. You know, and again, there's a great passage go to Jeremiah 17, if you can find it. In Jeremiah 17, there's a passage where Jeremiah contrasts where we get our strength from. And sometimes we get our strength from man, but really we're supposed to get our strength from God. Yeah. In verse 5, it says, "Cursed is the one who trusts in man and draws strength from mere flesh." and whose heart turns away from the Lord. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord and whose confidence is in him. You know, the challenge for us and the kingdom is to draw our strength not just from people, but from God. And I understand there's moments in our life where we need some sort of cooperation with one another. Like, life gets hard, it gets challenging, and sometimes it's kind of nice to get a text message that says, "Good work, Ben, keep going." And sometimes you need that hug from that brother or sister. And sometimes you just need to grab a beer or a coffee and you need to spend that time. I get that. But that's supposed to complement your covenant with God. It's not supposed to be your covenant with God. That we draw strength from the scriptures. We read our Bible and we think, man, God promises me stuff and he's going to come through on it and I believe it, so my life's going to reflect that. And the church is awesome, but it's not where we get our strength from. We cannot confuse where we try to draw our strength from. Because sadly, Samson gets this all confused in his mind and in his life. And there's this tragic line in the passage. It's actually verse 20. There we go. It says, "Then she called Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He woke from his sleep and thought, I'll just go out as before and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had left him." A tragic line in Samson's life, that he didn't know that God left him. That God just departed. I'm not in this covenant with you anymore because you broke too many things, Samson. And that tragic line is what humbles him and leads him into prison and to this tough life. But there is still hope afterwards. But I read that line and I thought, man, I would hate that to be true of my life. Like, he's up here preaching, he's up here doing this stuff, but he didn't even know the Lord left him. And man, what a sad place it would be if that line could be said true of anyone in this room. That we just don't know it. And the challenge for us is to draw our strength from the scriptures. In verse 28, the good news comes where he cries out to God one more time. And there's a theme in this passage where you've got to cry out to God. He's going to come through. God is gracious. You will reap what you sow, but if you sow crying out to God, he will come through. Verse 28, then Samson prayed to God, "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more." You know, that kind of a prayer might need to be prayed in this room. There might be people who are feeling like, man, I can relate to this story. Some of these things are going on right now. That's the prayer for you. That's the prayer. God, give me strength one more time. Come through on your promise one more time. I want to be the man you want me to be. One more time, God. Please come through. The good news is God does come through. And God's just waiting for us to call out and cry out for him to intervene. And the challenge for us is, what's that prayer we need to pray where divine intervention is just waiting around the corner? Let's keep moving. Second point, imaginary click, is flirting with the line. In the church, a little bit of flirting goes on sometimes, you know, especially around weddings. Romance is in the air. And it's not uncommon to see a little bit of flirting, right? But we want to make sure we're flirting in the right kinds of ways. And this point right here is about Samson, who lives a life where he flirts with the line so much, and he's so used to flirting with the line that eventually he falls off the line. He crosses the line. And if you go to the next slide, this is going to represent the whole point. A water bottle at the edge of a table. And if you've ever studied the Bible with Mike Fontenot, he tells you this. Hey, where are you going to put your water bottle when you come to a table? You're going to put it right at the edge? No, you're going to put it in the middle of the table. And it's a spiritual point that, hey, guys, they like to try to find the line, and they'll go as close to the line as possible, as long as it doesn't fall over that line. And that's how Samson lives his life. First of all, he meets his wife where? he's actually in the wrong area to meet a wife. He's not at church meeting his future wife, okay? He's out there in Gaza, in wine territory. That's no place to meet a sister. And what does he do when he's out in the wrong place? Well, he meets the wrong girl. He meets a prostitute. And then he goes to another woman who's not, again, a Jewish girl. He goes outside of the kingdom. He's flirting with the line of what's right and what's wrong. He makes a bet earlier on with Philistines. He loses the bet, and then to come good on the bet, he kills 30 guys, takes their clothes, so he fulfills the bet. And you think, was that the right thing to do? Like, you kept your word with the bet, but you killed 30 dudes. Like, come on, man. And then again, he marries Delilah, and again, he's got no business. This is the third relationship, the third female relationship in his life that doesn't go well. The one good one is his mother, by the way. He's got a great relationship with his mom, and that's his saving grace. But with Delilah, what's interesting is she's asking him, what's the source of your strength? I need to know where you get your great strength from. Tell me. That's what I want to hear. And he's not going to say, the source of my strength is God. He attributes it to his hair. And that's the big question that we're asking today. But if you go to the next slide, it's 4 times she asks him this question, and he keeps giving her different answers. And the first time, he just says something random. The second time, he says something random again. But the third time, it gets a little closer to where his hair actually is. In verse 11, he says, if anyone ties new ropes and they braid it into my hair. Sorry, that's verse 13. If you braid it into my hair. So the hair is the line. And first of all, we start very secure in the middle of the table. If you just tie me with rope, I'll become weak. And then it gets a little closer to that line. If you start playing with my hair, I'll get weak. And then eventually he tells her the truth. And I think as Samson does this, I think it's not totally uncommon for disciples to do this as well. Is we try to find where the line is, and we start pretty secure in the middle of the table. Like, my drink is in the right place right now. But if you wait a little bit, you just get further and further and closer to that line. Eventually he crosses the line, and the line leads to his downfall. But the question comes for us is, are there any lines that we're flirting with this morning? Like, are there some boundaries or some things in our life that we know I'm not supposed to cross this, that we're getting a little bit too close to? Like, my hair's not supposed to be chopped off, but I'm going to put some braids in my hair. That's what Samson's line is. I'm allowed to watch TV, but what kind of shows are you allowed to watch on TV? Are you flirting with that line of what Jesus would watch and what he probably wouldn't watch when it comes to the things you watch on TV? What about the music you listen to? Do you flirt with that line of, there was no swear words, or there was nothing like this in it, but I listen to this music. I'm not really sure if I'm supposed to be listening to this or not. Are you flirting with that line when it comes to the choices in your music? If you change the slide, in Galatians 5 verse 19, this is a very common verse in a sin study. And it says, the acts of the flesh are really confusing and blurry, and no one really knows where the line is. No, the acts of the flesh are obvious. That line we know where that line is. Sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. And things like that. There's some lines for us, guys. And if you're a disciple, and you've been a disciple for a while, you probably read that list and think, yeah, I don't go over those lines. I don't have fits of rage. But do you get close to it? Man, when you discipline your kids, and when you have kids that are young and they don't listen to you over and over and over again, Fit of rage? Oh man, I never yelled. I never swore. Yeah, but what was going on in your heart? What happened on the inside? Are you floating with that line of fits of rage? What about impurity? Well, I never watched pornography. I wouldn't cross that line. Yeah, are there lines getting crossed in your heart? There are other things where you're watching things you know you shouldn't be watching. You know, what about the line of driving? I didn't break the law. I didn't speed. I didn't go over the limit. I didn't get caught speeding. But I was really late to church this morning, so I was flirting with that line, you know. You only cross the line when the police catch you, right? What about, well, I had to change the song on my phone when I was driving. You don't understand, Ben. I'm allowed to touch it for 5 seconds. No, you're not. Don't touch your phone when you drive, guys. What about when it comes to banter and joking? I like to joke and I like to banter. And some people also like to joke and banter. But there's a line between a joke and unkindness. And sometimes I pull a Samson and I cross that line. But again, it's this idea of I'm just flirting with the lines of where I shouldn't be flirting with. How about being kind instead, Ben? How about that? Try that one on for size. How about instead of seeing how far you can push a joke, how about you try to build people up? Man, when it comes to our hearts and when it comes to Samson's example, he flirts with lines over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden he falls off the edge and he's shocked and surprised. How did I get to this place? And I think sometimes in our lives we can be shocked. How did I get to this place? How did I get here right now? Well, maybe I was flirting with lines I shouldn't have flirted with. Sin is obvious and lines are clear. It's the human heart that tries to distort it and to push it and to say, let me do some things that I don't really know if I should be doing this right now. And the third and final point, guys, let's keep moving. Failure doesn't have to be final. And that's the good news of Samson's life. Is you read this life about a guy who's prophesied to do so many great things. His mum is so supportive of him. His dad is supportive. They're like, this dude is going to change the world. And then his whole life, he just messes up. And then eventually, he loses his eyes and he ends up in prison. And you think, dang, how did this guy get there? And if you don't know this, Rob doesn't like gore, okay? He would never watch a movie like Final Destination. So I had to get an eye-gouging photo out that's cartoon so he could handle it. But it's an interesting passage where God has to take a guy's eyes so that he can start to see things clearly. And you think, wow, that's kind of crazy, right? His eyes were taken so that he can start to see. And the big question comes for us is, was it a bad thing that Samson's eyes were taken? Yes, he went through some pain. It was terrible. It was tragic. Well, I don't know if he would think that. Like one day, I plan to talk to Samson and ask him, hey, dude, like, you know that bad thing that happened to you? You know how your wife left you and she betrayed you for money, and then your eyes got taken, and then you ended up in jail? Do you think that was like a terrible thing that happened to you? I'm pretty sure he's going to say, yeah, it sucked, it was bad, but it had to happen. I actually had to get to that place. God humbled me, and he humbled me at 100% of that word humble, all at once, but it changed my life. It actually made me re-examine the way I was going about things. You know those lines I was flirting with? I stopped doing that. Like, I actually really worked on my relationship with God more than my relationship with girls. He might say that, or he might be a bit bitter. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure if you asked him, dude, are you glad that happened to you? He'll say, no, I'm not glad, but I'm grateful. And sometimes when pain comes into our life and the pain of sin and the consequences to our actions comes in, we're gonna suffer, we're gonna feel some things. You might not be glad about it, but you might be grateful because God helped you learn some things through the pain. And what's interesting is this moment probably had to happen to Samson so that he changed some things about his life. That he looked at himself and said, man, what am I doing? How did I end up here? Maybe I should change some things about what's going on. I think the first night in jail would have been rough. Don't get me wrong. His hair's gone, his wife's gone, his eyes are gone. Everything's tough. But there's an epic line in this verse that we sometimes miss. And it's in verse 22. But the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. And I love that line. His hair doesn't grow back the night after his big fall. How long does it take for your hair to grow? It takes a while. It takes some time. But here's a blind dude sitting in jail, and what do you think he's doing with his time? He's probably touching the back of his head thinking, man, it's coming back. It's coming back. God is going to come back with me. The Spirit of God can come on me one more time. And that's supposed to give us great hope. That, man, if I am in some sort of jail right now, if my eyes have been taken at some point, I can still sit there and the growth will start. My character might not change overnight. My hair might not grow back all in one sitting, but it will grow. My character will grow. Things will get better. I can learn something from this. I'm not too far gone. And sometimes we need to hear that. That, man, things are bad right now, but you're not too far gone. You can be redeemed. God is still there waiting. And so often we can feel like those failures and we feel like, man, I just messed everything up. And I want to speak to the failures for a minute. You got to understand that success and failure isn't always, success is good and failure is bad. Sometimes those hard moments develop strong character. And sometimes success makes you not very pleasant to be around. It's not always one for one when it comes to our lives. That actually success in Samson's life didn't make him a very likable guy. It actually made him a little unbearable. And the hard moments and the failures are supposed to transform us to become the men and women that God calls us to be. That failure doesn't have to be final. And it doesn't have to be bad as long as you let God work in those moments. So the challenge for us is to feel our hair grow. Amen, Mikey. Sorry, brother. He just looked at me like, it can grow back. Things can come back. Your covenant with God, if it was once great and it's not so great right now, it can get better. Amen. He can strengthen you one more time, and the challenge is to cry out to God and to let Him strengthen us one more time. Amen. Amen. I love you guys. Let's stand for a final song.
Amen. Church, let's stand. We're going to sing one more song, and we'll have a great time of fellowship and family sport.
Till
just a little closer.